Hi, and welcome to episode 7 of the CreativeMoJo podcast. My name is Joanne, and I'm coming to you from Calgary, Alberta, Canada. And I'm so pleased to have you all here joining me this morning. I say this morning, but I'm assuming that that's what time you're watching this. Could be afternoon, evening, whatever. I'm just happy to have you, whatever time of day you're joining me. If you're a new viewer or a returning viewer, it's so nice to have you spend a little bit of time with me. I'm recording today on Saturday, May 14th, and if you watched my last episode, you may have noticed that it got posted a couple of days later than usual. I usually try to get my episode up Saturday evening or Sunday morning, and the last episode actually didn't get up till Monday night. I had all kinds of trouble uploading it to YouTube. It would upload, and then it would be processing, and then it would sit processing at 95% for hours and hours and hours, like overnight, Sunday night, and stuff like that. And I tried to upload it again a couple of times, and from my phone and from my computer and in different formats and all that kind of thing. And then eventually Monday night, it just uploaded fine, no problem. So who knows? Hopefully this one will get up sooner. But all that aside, yeah, welcome. And I've got a few things to talk to you about today. I had a busy week this week, so I didn't get quite as much knitting time in as I have been getting in previous weeks and as I had hoped to get. But I got a few things to show you. No surprise, well, no surprise to me, maybe a surprise to you, but most of what I'm going to show you this week is not stuff I showed you last week. I actually didn't spend too much time knitting on some of the projects I've shown in the past, and I started a few new projects instead. As I said, no surprise to me, because that's kind of what I do a lot of times. I have a short attention span, I guess, sometimes when it comes to knitting projects, but hopefully I'll get back to some of my other projects soon. But let's start with, let me show you what I've been working on this week. So the first thing is the one project that I have shown in the past. I did show last week, and I did some more on it, and that is my Summertide shawl by Helen Stewart. There's a picture of what the pattern will look like when it's finished, although obviously not those colors, but it's a beautiful, beautiful pattern, and I'm actually really enjoying it and looking forward to hopefully putting a little bit more time into it this week. But I got some work done on it since I showed it last week. I'm knitting mine out of hedgehog fibers in the sock base, which is a merino, just a merino nylon. It's 90% merino and 10% nylon. So it's a beautiful base and really, really soft. And it's, as you can see from the picture, it's a 2-color shawl. So I've started the beginning of the shawl, and I did actually get into the lace a little bit, which is this is the right side. I'll show you on the right side. That's the beginnings of the lace pattern. It begins with garter stitch for the first part of the section there, and then it goes into a lace pattern for a bit, continuing in this color, and this color is called Exploding Peacock. You can probably kind of guess why from the colors that are in there. And then it will continue in a lace, big heavy lace edging, or not heavy but wide lace edging that I'm going to be doing in this color, which is Shamrock. So I think, as I mentioned before, kind of my idea is that the shawl will be like, because it was a mystery knit along last year, I think, and it's and the theme of it is summertime, and I thought these colors were great for, beautiful field of wildflowers and green grass. So I think that's going to be really pretty. I'm knitting this on my signature needles on 3.75, I do believe. It's on kind of a short needle at the moment. 4, sorry, I lied, not 3.75, they're 4 millimeter. And I don't know, I may have to eventually take this off and put it onto a different needle, because this one is a bit short. I think this is only maybe a 24-inch cable, I don't know. But I don't have a longer cable for these needles. So, but I've been enjoying knitting them on these needles, so I'm going to go for it as long as I can. The only thing I'm not super crazy about is the tightness of the edging. Makes it, let's see if you can see that. Yeah, kind of, it's tight at the edge a little bit. We'll see how that blocks out. It does have a bit of stretch, but not as much stretch as the garter stitch has, but it might give it a nice curved shape. I'll see when I block it out how that turns out. But so that's, as I said, the Summertide Shawl by Helen Stewart. I'm really enjoying working on that. Then the other couple of projects that I worked on this week were, I cast on a new pair of just vanilla socks. I like to always have a pair of just stockinette vanilla easy socks that I can carry around with me and have in my purse and that kind of thing, that don't have any pattern and don't require really any attention to work on. I think this colorway is really cute. This is opal. This is some opal sock yarn. It's the Opal Smile line, I think. It's these lovely, like this sort of fuchsia purpley color and light blue and the white with little speckles of purple in there, and then there's a gray in it. So, and it's a, as opals are most of the time, it's a striping sort of fake Fair Isle and stripes kind of pattern. This is the label, which is the Opal Smile. As I said, I don't know what the color is. It just says color, the 7937 is the number. But anyway, and it's kind of fun. I hand wound it into a ball. I like to do that sometimes. It's especially with the yarns that come in the sort of, you know, ball / skein thing, commercial sock yarns. It's easier to put them in my bag and pull from the bag when they're in a ball. So I had a little fun and hand wound that into a ball. These will probably be for me, I think. I don't actually have any opal socks of my own. Almost all the opal socks that I have knit in the past have been for my husband. So those will probably be for me since they're a little bit girlier colors. And that's just in a little project bag. That's one of the ones that I make. And I should have said this one is in a bag. You can tell I love the drawstring bags. They tend to be kind of my go-to default. I do have some really nice zippered project bags that I enjoy as well, but I just find these easy and convenient. This is from a shop called Madbird on Etsy. Again, it's another one where I think I showed some before with the, it's got a seam up the back right there, but with the sugar skulls on them, which I just love the Mexican sugar skull art, and have lots of bags with that kind of different fabrics with those motifs on it. And then let's see what else. The last thing that I worked on this week, well, second to last, because I do have a finished object to show you that I also worked on this week, but is a new project I cast on this week. And this is for me knitting along with the cowl that I started a week or two ago in our group. The cowl is called Late to the Party, and the Late to the Party cowl. And the idea of it is to knit one of those patterns that's a super popular pattern that lots and lots of people have knit before, but that maybe that you haven't knit. So I have several of those in my queue. I don't know why. I'm not really one to what's the best way to say this? I don't always want knit up something right when it comes up. I really enjoy seeing other people's projects and reading their notes and kind of getting a sense of what projects are like before I dive into them, to really determine if they're something that I want to knit and that they're going to be right for me and all those kind of things. So consequently, I don't often knit things right when they're super popular at the moment. And then there are also some of those projects that I've had in my queue for a long time and looked at it and I know I want to knit, and I just for one reason or another haven't gotten around to them. So I thought it'd be fun to kind of kick off a inaugural cowl in our group with this idea of knitting a project that has been super popular, but that maybe you haven't knit. So I actually put up in the thread in the group. We have a group, it's the CreativeMoJo group on Ravelry, and in that group, in the thread, I put up a project bundle with a bunch of examples of the kinds of projects I'm thinking. The only rule is basically that it has to have more than 4,000 projects already listed on Ravelry as finished or being worked on or whatever. 4,000 projects listed in total. And there are lots of those patterns. I think the bundle I put up has 25 or 27, somewhere in that neighborhood. And they're things like the featherweight cardigan and the color affection shawl, or the monkey socks, or Hermione's everyday socks, or all those kind of projects that patterns that you've probably seen loads of times. So I hope that you'll come, if you haven't already, I hope that you'll come and join, that you maybe have one of those kind of projects that's been on your radar or is in your queue or whatever, that you might, or even that you're knitting for another Cal or group or whatever. I don't mind double dipping at all. So I know lots of people are knitting lots of people are knitting Cookie A socks for the Cookie Jar Cal that's being run by Lara from the Fawn Knits podcast and Candace from Pin Feathers and Pearls. So if you happen to be knitting, I think the two patterns that qualify, Cookie A patterns that qualify for this, are the monkey socks or Hetera socks, which are ones I'm also working on, although I'm not showing them this week because I didn't do any work on them. But anyway, this is what I cast on specifically kind of to play along in this Cal, although of course I'm not actually entering my own project for my own prizes because that'd be silly. But a couple other people are doing this as well, this project as well, and I was like, oh, I've always wanted to do that one. So this is the Zuzu's Petals by Karina Spencer, and I think I have a picture. It's black and white, unfortunately, but that gives you an idea. It's like a shawl in its shaping, but it's actually a cowl, which is really cool. So it's like a shawlette, small shawlette, but that will stay on all the time because it goes over your head as opposed to draping around like this. And it comes in two sizes, sort of for two weights of yarn, sort of a sport weight and a worsted weight. I'm doing the sport weight, which is that works out to be the larger size. It's just larger cast on. And I'm doing it on 3.75 millimeter needles. And the yarn that I chose to use is actually some of my hand spun. I've only knit with I haven't been spinning for that long, actually, just a couple of years. And spindle spinning I do all my spinning on spindles. So it's not the fastest thing in the world, but so it takes me a while to get some finished yarn. But I have been trying really hard to knit with it, not let it sit too long in my stash. I know I've heard a lot of other spinners say that, particularly with earlier yarns that you've spun, if you let them sit a really long time and don't work with them and you get better as a spinner, you may look at that and be critical of that earlier yarn and then decide not to use it. So I thought, rather than have it sit for a while and then not use it, it's too much love and work has gone into it and it's too pretty not to use. So this is, I think, the third maybe yarn that I completed a couple of years, just last year, I guess, maybe this time last year, I think I finished this yarn. It's really pretty. See if we can get a good, yeah. It's the fiber was from Cloud Lover, and it's a Cloud Lover on, I don't know if she's on Etsy. She has maybe her own shop, but I'll link it anyway. And it's a merino cashmere silk blend. It was beautiful to spin and work with. I spun it in two sort of batches, divided it in half and then in half again, and spun two and plied them, and then spun the other two and plied them. And I did notice when I pulled it out to work, balled it up to work with it, that one of my two balls was slightly thinner yarn than the first one. So it fluctuates kind of between a probably fingering weight and a sport, maybe a DK even in places, but I think it averages out to be a sport weight, so that felt pretty good about it. And I am getting the gauge that the pattern called for. I am, however, a little worried about how it's going to fit. This is the top, the opening that your head goes through, and it seems kind of small to me, although it has pretty good stretch, I guess. So hopefully it'll block out to stretch out a little bit and not be too tight around the neck. But I'm about halfway through the lace, so I'm actually making pretty good progress. I think that's upside down that I'm showing it to you, but it's really pretty. And the yarn, as I said, is really pretty. I've got about ended up with about 400, just under 400 yards of this, so I actually have lots of yarn to complete this with. And this is the what I have of the left of the first half. This is the one that was ever so slightly thicker, as you can sort of see. And then I have another ball of the second half, which is a little bit thinner. This is I spun and plied the second half of this several months after the first half, and so I think I can already see that I had improved on spinning this from that. It's evener and stuff, but it's so pretty. You can see the colors. It's the color was called Winter Rose, and it's beautiful pinks and grays and greens, and really pretty. So I made really good progress on that in like 2 or 3 days, and then I set it down for another project. But I'll get back to that this week, and I'll probably actually finish that, I think, fairly soon. And there's a couple of other people, I think, in our group that have chosen to do this for the cow. So again, I really hope that you'll come and check that out and consider joining in on it. It's going to be fun. I'll show you now, actually, since I'm talking about it, and since that's actually the end of my works in progress, I'll show you a couple of the prizes that I've got 2 prizes at the moment for the cow, and I may get a 3rd prize depending on how many people we end up having, how many finished projects there end up being. At the end of June, I may add a 3rd prize, but I'll show you the 2 I have to begin with. This I showed on the podcast's 2nd, 3rd episode, in maybe 3rd. This is Sea Turtle Fiber Arts. This is a dyer from here in the Calgary area, and I picked up this really pretty yarn. It's Ridley Sock, which is 80/20 merino nylon, and the color is Rainbow Bright. And I saw a sample of it knit up, and it was just beautiful. It's basically when it's knit up, it's this sort of all over gray with these little pops of these different bright rainbow colors in short repeats that come in all the way through it. So super, super pretty. And as I said, she's a dyer from here. I bought this yarn when I went to a yarn event here called the Fiber Shindig a couple of weeks ago. And with that, so one person will win that yarn, beautiful yarn, and one of my project bags. At the moment, I only have sort of sock size bags. This actually slightly larger than this one. This was a early on sort of trial run, and these are ever so slightly bigger than that. But they work fine. They're great for a smaller size project. I have my well, I actually have the cowl I showed you in here, so that's pretty good. I've got two balls of yarn, 2 smaller balls of yarn, and the whole cowl project in that one bag. And like I said, this one's slightly bigger, so they work great for a sock project, or anything kind of single skein project, smaller shawl maybe. But anyway, this is a fun one with this little Keep Calm and Carry yarn logo on it, and it's lined in a purple and white contrasting fabric, and it's got a flat bottom on it, and it's a little drawstring. As I said, I really like the drawstring bags. I don't actually interface these because I use a slightly heavier, kind of slightly canvasy feeling fabric, and I like that because they squish up really easy. I find them really useful for just tossing them in my backpack or my purse, and they all kind of just squish up and shove in there with all kinds of other stuff, but they protect your work. So one person will get those 2 items, and the second prize I have at the moment is this beautiful yarn that was actually gifted to me a while back, and I would love to make something with it, but I have lots and lots and lots of yarn. So I thought I would share this lovely yarn with you guys. It's in a natural color. It's Shibui. It's the Shibui Dune is the base, and it's 50% baby alpaca, 25% baby camel, and 25% silk. So it's a real luxury base. It's super, super soft and squishy. It's got that little bit of halo. I don't know if you can see, but it's got a tiny little bit of halo that you get from alpaca. And there are 4 skeins of it. It's let's see, it's a I guess it's probably a fingering weight, maybe a sport weight. The gauge, it doesn't say that weight on here, but it does say the gauge is 22 stitches for 4 inches on a 3.75 millimeter needle, and 50 grams is 142 yards. So yeah, I guess it would probably qualify as a sport weight. The color is mineral, and there are 4 skeins of it. So what did I say the yardage was there? 140. There's about 600. There's about 142 yards, so just under 600 yards of it. So in a sort of sport weight, that's enough to do a sort of medium, nice size shawl or something in it. And as I said, it's really lovely, soft, squishy, velvety, beautiful yarn. The camel and the silk content in there are just heaven. So somebody will win that as well. So those are our 2 prizes at the moment. Like I said, I'm considering adding a third. So where are we now? So my my finished object, and this comes with a bit of a funny story. As I said, my week was a bit busy this week. I had lots of things going on with work. I had a couple of meetings. I'll talk a bit more about that in a minute. And my husband's been out of town all week, and I thought I would take this week. I'm drinking one of my favorite things to drink, which is iced coffee. I opted for a straw because I had ice cubes in here earlier and I didn't want them to rattle around and make a bunch of noise. Although they've all melted off now. But anyway, I thought I'd take advantage of this week when my husband was away and I was a slightly more master of my own time to spend some time with both my mother and father, who both live here in the city, but who are not married to each other. My parents divorced when I was 12 or 13. And my father I hadn't actually seen in a little bit, and I was feeling a bit guilty that I hadn't spent a little more time with him. And I thought, oh, this is a really good week to, get a little quality time in with my dad. And my dad's 80 now, or as he liked to say over and over all the time, he's an octogenarian. So yeah, I made a date with him to go up to his place and take him out for lunch. And we did a little shopping as well. The place where we went for lunch there's a big outlet mall type thing right near where he and his wife live. And we went up there, and there's some really nice restaurants there. So we did a couple of errands while we were up there, and one of them, and I guess I should preface this by saying, as I said, my dad's 80 now. He's almost 81, and he's having a bit of memory problems. He's got a bit of a dementia going on, and memory problems. Not really super severe in the sense that it's not like he doesn't remember who he is or who members of the family are or those kinds of things, but particularly his short-term memory is getting sketchy. And and he's developed this one hilarious habit which sort of plays into this story, and I'll tell you about that in a second, but let me set up for you. So one of the errands that we did while we were up at this mall was there's the Michaels right there, and I thought, I want to pop into Michaels. I wanted to get a box. Kristen of the Wool and Vine podcast has been doing the box of socks, Cal, where you knit 12 pairs of socks in the year and you put them in a pretty box. And I thought I could probably get 12 pairs of socks for myself, no problem, including I knit enough pairs of socks, and I'm sort of a fast enough sock knitter that if I set my mind to it without too much trouble, I could probably have 12 pairs of socks. And I thought, nice to get a good excuse to get a pretty box, right? So we went up to Michael's, and I got this really pretty box. It's sort of like a fake trunk that I'm going to store my socks for myself for this year. Anyway, so I said to my father that I wanted to go into Michael's and I wanted to get a box, and we went in. And while I was there, I went, of course, and looked at the yarn, because Michael's is the good place here I think most in the US as well, to buy the Patton's Croy sock. And I really enjoy that yarn as a inexpensive, simple workhorse kind of commercial yarn. So I like to have some of that, and I only had a few skeins left. So I thought, while we're here, I'll go see if they have some colors that I haven't picked up before. So we were looking at the sock yarn, at the Patton's Croy sock yarns, and my father asked me about how long it takes to knit a pair of socks, or how long it takes me to knit a pair of socks. And I said, well, for me, probably depends how much time I put into them, but anywhere from 3 or 4 days to 2 weeks for me. And I had asked him if he would like to have a new pair of socks and if he wanted to pick out a color. So he picked, and he said yes, and he picked out a color of yarn from the patterns that I said I would knit him a pair of socks. And I said, you know what, I will go home and cast these on when I get home today, and we'll see how long. I'll knit them up kind of as quickly as I can, and we'll see how long that takes me. And in the context of that, I was telling him about having watched recently all the episodes on the Knitting Expat podcast and the Twitch and Stitch podcast with Twitch and Stitch is with Marcia, it's very little, and Knitting Expat with Mina. The two of them in January. If you haven't watched those podcasts or those parts of those episodes that are like January essentially of this year, you should go do that because it's fantastic. That in January they challenged each other to a sock knit along to see who could knit the most socks in a month, and amazingly, they tied at the end of January for 35 pairs of socks each, which blew my mind that anybody could knit 35 pairs of socks in a month, let alone that the two of them both knit 35 pairs. And I don't know how they did that. I consider myself a reasonably fast and prolific sock knitter, and there's no way I could do 35 pairs a month. So I was telling my father about this, and he said, oh, it must have to do with the technique of the way they knit and the mechanics of it. And I said, yeah, I'm sure you're right. But so we were talking a little bit about this, and somewhere in the context of that, I mentioned that one of the knitters lived in the Okanagan Valley in BC, that's Marcia, and that one lived in Bahrain, Mina, in Bahrain. My father said, oh, yes, Bahrain, yes. That's the Arabian Peninsula. And I said, yeah, it's right next to Saudi Arabia. And he immediately started saying, oh, well, I remember when Sandy and I, that's his wife, he said, Sandy and I traveled there. And when we traveled there, and he started talking about things about the region. And I laughed because, but just sort of agreed along with him because he's never traveled there. And this has become a thing that has recently occurred with him where he enjoys, he was a professor of, he taught at the university level. He taught teachers how to teach social studies and geography and that sort of thing. And he has super vast knowledge of geography and different parts of the world and history and all of that. So he knows where all these places are, and he has traveled a lot. He's been to a lot of places, and he's reached this place where he can't quite remember where he has traveled or where he hasn't. And so his default is to sort of say he's traveled everywhere. My sister and I were talking about it the other night because he recently talked to her about how they had traveled down to the tip of South America and then gone to the South Pole, which he has also not traveled to. But anyway, so it's a funny story about the joys and challenges and delights of when your parents get a little older. This is my dad a few years back up here, by the way, and love him to pieces. And I keep feeling like, well, as long as his memory gaps and stuff are more about not remembering to take his car keys places or that where he's traveled or those sorts of things, as opposed to losing who he is or who we are, and that it's okay. We'll muddle along with it. I know it's harder on his wife because she's there with him all the time, but and has to deal with all of those things on a daily basis. But we're kind of all as a family enjoying that he has now in his imagination, I guess, this very rich history of places that he's traveled. So anyway, all of that to say, I told him I would go home and cast on a pair of socks and see how fast I could knit them for him. So I did that, and I did not bad. I started them on Tuesday evening, and I finished them on Friday evening. So 3 days of knitting and around other things. And the yarn that I used for these is the Patent Croy Socks FX. I like this yarn. This is the first time I've actually knit with the FX colorways. But this color is Cadet Colors. And these are the socks. So that's reasonably true to color. It's they're a little bit, yeah, that's not bad actually. They're blues and grays. And because as my dad said when he picked this color out, he said, well, one doesn't want too much craziness going on their socks, do they? Well, I guess Some people don't. Some people don't. Some people don't mind the craziness, but some people like the more conservative socks. So I was happy to knit in this, and actually, this was a very enjoyable knit. I said very enjoyable yarn. The Patons Kroy FX is a heavier sock weight. I would say actually this is probably a sport weight, really, rather than it's not a fingering weight. But so it knits up a denser, thicker sock. These will be great winter socks for my dad, I think. I did so because of the yarn is a little thicker, I went up to a 2.5 millimeter needle, and I did 64 stitches on the 2.5. 2x2 ribbing up top, a 6-inch leg. And I was a little worried the yardage is not great on these. So I was, and my dad's got about a size 12 foot. So I wanted to make sure I didn't run out. So I would normally make the leg just a tiny bit longer, but I didn't. And I ended up with this little ball of yarn left over when I finished. So, I'm pretty sure they're going to fit just great. Heel flap and gusset. Nothing else extraordinary really to tell you about them. There are 2. This one has this weird total. This is where I was in the palest color, and these kind of color repeats. They don't match in their striping, and that's because I don't think the color repeats in Patons Kroy are the same all the way through. I think they just are a little kind of willy-nilly, I guess. But this is where I stopped to do the heel flap on the back, and by the time I finished the heel flap and picked up the stitches for the gusset and then came back around the front, I had gone from this light color to the darkest of the color. So it does have this one weird, super evident stripe there. But I don't mind it, and I'm pretty sure my dad won't mind, and these are going to be very comfy. I have to say that for a sturdy, kind of rustic-y sock yarn, I do actually think Patons Kroy is also nice and soft. So while I got these, I picked up 3 other colors, and I'm looking forward to making some other probably Christmas socks for some of the men folk in my family for this coming year. So anyway, so those are my finished object for this week, and they were, as I said, they were really fun to do. So that's my knitting. What else? Where am I? I'm just looking at my notes here. Talked about the cow, talked about the works in progress, talked about the FOs. I will talk to you a little bit about stash, because I do have some new stash again this week. I put an order in about 2 weeks ago to a Canadian dyer. This is one of those, I do this all the time when I find a beautiful, beautiful dyer. And this is a new to me dyer that I hadn't heard of. And I went to her shop and I looked at things in her shop, and she's just like, oh my God, she has all these gorgeous yarns. And so I looked, and there were dozens of colors that I would have liked to have come. I could have bought her whole shop, honestly, which would have been a lot of yarn. But she, so I looked at stuff, and then I went away from it, which is what I often will do. And then I went back a couple days later, and I looked at it all again, and it still looked as beautiful and desirable to me. And I think so probably I had been and looked at her yarns like 3 times, and then one day on Ravelry, or on Instagram, sorry, she posted a message that the next couple of people who ordered from her shop would get a little extra treat in with their package, which I'll show you in a sec. So I was like, oh, there's the excuse I need. Buy. So I ordered 2 skeins, and the dyer is lichen and lace. Let's see if you can show her card is going to show up her logo a little better. Lichen and lace. Look at the back side. Her name is Megan Ingman. She's a Canadian dyer, I think in New Brunswick, east coast of Canada. And if you haven't heard of her yarn before, if you haven't seen, you should definitely go check out her shop. It's www.lichenandlace.com. As you can see, hopefully that's focused enough there. I don't know. But anyway, I will put it down here. Go check out her shop and look at her yarns. Her colors are absolutely stunning, and everything about the product was beautiful. I'll show you how her cards are lovely, and her prices are really, really reasonable, especially if you happen to be ordering from the US. What you'll get for your dollar. I think these skeins were $28 a skein, which I think is an incredibly good price. $28 Canadian. So I highly recommend her, and the yarn that came was beautiful. These are the 2 skeins that I got, and oh my gosh, I love them so much. And they're going to go together in something. I had picked them out kind of separately, but then I started thinking about the 2 colors and thinking, oh, well, we'll see when they get here and what they look like. They might go together well, and sure enough, I think they go together beautifully. I think they will make a absolutely amazing, probably 2-color shawl. This color is Citron. Both of these are in her sock yarn base, which is an 80/20 superwash merino and nylon. There's 420 yards, 115 grams actually, 420 yards. Really soft, really, really squishy, really lovely, good, pretty high twist. This, as I said, is Citron. It's primarily a really kind of citron green, I guess, basically. There's little pops of orange in there, which will go really nicely with this color is Rosewood. And it's a beautiful, looks a little probably redder there than it is. It's actually browner. If I can, I think it looks the best if I show it more true to its color. But it's a real rosewood brown color. Love these so much. So highly recommend. And as I said, they came with a little extra, which was what was ended up being the incentive. And the extra is really sweet too. In this tiny little package, tiny little handmade envelope with a sweet little note from her, came these 2 stitch markers, or the progress keeper, really, that I just adore. Let's see if I can get them to, well, it's going to hang the wrong way, but let's see if you can see that. It's a little feather, and a kind of coppery sort of, and this is an even tinier, tiny little, come on, hold still, tiny little feather. They're so sweet. So, and there were 2 of them. So anyway, highly recommend. Order some lichen and lace. You will not be disappointed. And then the last thing, the last 2 things I'm going to show you, these actually come with another story. So earlier this week, I noticed that Jenny from the Lone Larch podcast had posted some an update of project bags on her in her Etsy shop, and I've been looking at her bags and kind of coveting those for a while. And oh yeah, I'm gonna go and check out her update and get a bag. Unfortunately, by the time I got to her website, there weren't all that many bags left, but there was one really cute one that I thought that would suit me just fine, and it's a sort of small project, like a sock project sort of size, although small shawl would also easily go in it. So I pushed order and bought the bag, and I think 2 days later, a day or 2 later, I got a message from her saying, hey, what are you doing on Friday? I'm coming into Calgary. As I said, she just lives in Olds, which is about an hour and a half, an hour to an hour and a half north of here. She said, I'm coming into Calgary for some family stuff, and do you want to get together and do a bag swap? And she had looked in my shop and picked out a bag, and she said, we can just trade. And I thought, oh, that'd be fantastic. We had messaged a few times and chatting, and I think, as I've said a couple times before, I totally love her podcast, and I'm really enjoying watching it, and I thought that would be fantastic. So we did. We made a date for Friday morning, and we got together and had coffee and a visit and had a fantastic time. She's as lovely and interesting and sweet and entertaining and funny and all those things that she on her podcast and in real life too. So we had a great visit. We hung out and chatted and had coffee for a bit, and then we walked up the street we were a couple blocks away from one of the local yarn stores here called Stash. So we walked up the street to Stash and poked our head in there, and unbeknownst to us, they were having a sale, and Jenny's stronger than me. She only got the needles that she was sort of intending to get when she went in there. But I am weak, and there was a sale, and so I bought yarn. Only 1 skein, but I couldn't resist. It's a skein of Sweet Georgia. in the Tough Love sock in the colorway Spruce. And look at that. As I said to Jenny, I had to buy it because it was just glowing at me off the shelf. It's actually, you can't even see how, I don't even know, like it's washing out a little bit. It is like the glowiest, bright, beautiful greeny blue. I just love this. I think this afternoon I may wind this up and cast on some socks for myself right away out of this because love the color. I had these all laid down together and I was like, look how beautifully those two go together too. But that's going to go with its rosewood partner. And as I said, these will probably become some socks for me. So, and then the bag that I got from Jenny, which is so cute. Look at this. Look at this little bag. Isn't that just the sweetest? It's like these, I think they're doves, maybe nightingales or doves or birds anyway. And balloons. There's you know, like party balloons, and there's, see on this side, there's a hot air balloon, and there's a little biplane, and then the clouds. I just adore it. It's beautiful, really nicely made. It's, like I said, it's a pretty good size actually. I probably will move my Zuzu's Petals project into here because it's a little bit bigger than my drawstring. And beautiful sky blue lining with a purple zipper and her lovely little tag. I'm really, really happy with this lovely bag. And she included, because again, she's awesome, she included a couple of little minis for me. This little mini from some socks she just knit recently. This is Fawn and the Fox Fiber Loris. I can't remember the name of this color, which is bad, but, and this, which is some lovely self-striping of socks that she's made recently again that she actually had on her feet when we met. And I'm not sure what this one is, but it's really cute too. So these two will go probably in my current current sock blanket, my Cozy Memories blanket, because I'm using all kind of blue, gray, purple bases in there. So these might get knit up into there this evening. And this will store away for other, I'm sure there will be another blanket in my future using all the other colors of leftovers that I had. So love those. And oh, and I should show you too. Here's Jenny's card as well, which is really, really lovely. So yeah, that was a special treat. So that's all my acquisitions. Oh, I know there was one more thing she included in her little package of stuff that Jenny gave to me, which I really also totally love, which is a little treat, a stitch marker. I'll be using that lots because that's super cute. So thank you so much, Jenny. That was so generous of you. And it was such a pleasure hanging out with you. Lastly, what do I want to talk to you about lastly? I was going to give you a couple more podcast recommendations, 2 podcasts that I spent a bit of time with this week that I really liked. Mandarins podcast with Melody. If you haven't watched Mandarins, you really, really should. She's just delightful, and I just really enjoy that podcast. If you don't know anything about it, she's a French lady that currently is living in Riga, Latvia, and I'm not sure what exactly has brought her to Latvia, but she's there. I don't think she's not living there permanently. I think she's there for a shorter period, like a couple of years, maybe, or a year. But and she just took up knitting a few years ago, but she's a great knitter, and she's a designer, and she designs really beautiful patterns, mittens and shawls and hats primarily, I think. And I super enjoy her podcast. There's something, I was thinking the other day that, you know, if I were younger, if I were doing my life over again, if I, you know, next time around, maybe is the way I want to say that, I would be her or be like her. She has a kind of, what to me seems like a fantastic life that is totally different really from my life, but is something that I've always been kind of drawn to and envious of people for. You know, number one, she lives in this very kind of romantic to me sort of place, living in Latvia, on the edge of the forest, and in Riga, which is got a lot of beautiful old very, very old part of the city, at least. I don't know that, I don't think the whole city is old, but a lot of it is beautiful, hundreds of years old. And, even, I mean, even living in France too would be fantastic to me. And she is a lover of nature and the land, and she uses all primarily, sort of natural yarn. She's worked hard to source yarns, natural sort of yarns that come from where she is right now. And she's doing some dyeing. She dyes yarn, and she does all natural dyeing, and she's really educated herself about that process, or she is, learning as she goes, and she's dyeing some beautiful yarns. And she does a lot of growing plants and foraging in the forest and all those kinds of things, which I just am really drawn to. It's, like I said, totally different from how I live my life. Not necessarily maybe something I'd be very good at. My husband jokes that he's the one with the green thumb in our household, and when he goes away a lot of times, as I say this, I'm just remembering, and when he goes away a lot of times, I completely forget to water the plants, and we only have plants now in our house that don't die when I forget to water them. And just as I said that, I'm looking across the room at some plants that I have completely not watered all week while he's been gone. So, oops. I'm not super great at that kind of thing, but I would like to be, and I would like to learn to be. And as I said, I watch Melody's podcast, and I go, oh, a different me, a different life. I would love to be like her and live that life. And it just seems so peaceful and romantic and lovely to me. And I just enjoy watching her podcast so much for being drawn into that kind of world that she is in. And it's beautiful, and her projects are beautiful, and her French accent is beautiful, and all those things. So I highly recommend watching that podcast if any of that sounds like anything you'd be into. And the other one that I watched this week was actually recommended by Melody on her podcast, and it's called The Gentle Knitter. And she only has 2 episodes out, which is unfortunate because I could have watched lots more of her, but hopefully she will have some more coming out. She started podcasting not very long ago, and she's not going to be, she said she won't be podcasting every week. She probably podcast kind of once a month thing. So hence the only 2 episodes so far. Her name is Nicole, and she's a Canadian. She lives in Ottawa. And The Gentle Knitter, you should go and check out her podcast again. She's beautiful, beautiful projects. And she's one of those, she seems full of, knitting wisdom. She is a sample knitter for a lot of, she's sample knitted stuff for Brooklyn Tweed and for Wool People, the Wool People magazine lines, and all kinds of designers and stuff. And so she's an expert knitter, I think. And, just in her first 2 episodes, she talked about a few little tips and tricks of things about techniques that were stuff that I learned right there. And she showed she's knitting a sweater with some beautiful Lopi yarn that she bought in Iceland when she was there a few years ago. I think she went on one of those trips that I think it was part of the same trip that Gudrun Johnson runs to go to Shetland, and she spent some time in Iceland and bought these very interesting sort of big flat cakes of Lopi, which I didn't even know this, that it's unspun yarn, so it like pulls apart when you knit with it. If you're not very, you have to be gentle with it as you knit to not pull it apart. But once it's knit into a garment, it becomes nice and sturdy. And anyway, there's all kinds of things to really enjoy about her first 2 episodes. So I highly recommend those 2. And I will link those 2 podcasts in my show notes. The other things that I was going to mention was speaking of podcasts, some other kinds of podcasts that I listen to a lot and really enjoy. As I said, this is a pretty busy week for me with work and stuff. And one of the things right now with stuff I'm doing at work is I'm attending a lot of meetings and doing a lot of consultations and stuff like that. And so I'm kind of driving around in the car a fair amount and spending a fair amount of time in the car. And I really like to listen to podcasts in the car. And the ones that I'm really into for that are nothing to do with knitting at all. But I thought I'd mention a couple of them because if you happen to have some of the same interests as me in this area, you might really enjoy these too. I love murder mystery, crime, true crime stuff. I would say 65% of what I read is probably murder mystery type books and things like that. And I really have gotten drawn into some of the podcasts and those sorts of things. It started with Serial was the first one that I listened to. I'm sure lots and lots of you listened to the Serial, the first season about the Adnan Syed murder mystery. Not murder, well, kind of. They don't know who really did it. So, but the murder case out of Baltimore. And I got really drawn into that. And following that, I started listening to another podcast called Undisclosed, which was also about that case in much greater detail and much more about the belief that he is innocent and the work to help him get a new trial and hopefully get out of jail for a crime that he pretty obviously didn't commit. And I really enjoyed that podcast, Undisclosed. They've sort of wrapped up their coverage of that story, and they're they have in the works stuff for another season that's going to talk about another case. But they really focus on people who are wrongfully convicted. And all of those as I said, if you enjoyed Serial, if you watched Making a Murderer, the documentary that was on Netflix, anyway, here is where I watched it. I think it was on Netflix in the US too. I'm not sure. Anyway, if you like that kind of stuff, you probably really like Undisclosed. You should probably go back and listen to it starting from the beginning to really follow along. And there are two others that I've been listening to that I'm really, really enjoying that are in this same vein. One is a Canadian one, and it's called Somebody Knows Something. And it's an investigative journalism kind of story. It's Canadian. It's done through the CBC, and it's a story about something that happened in rural Ontario 20 years maybe ago, somewhere in that vicinity, maybe more, maybe less, can't quite remember. A little boy that disappeared from a lake one day he was out with his father and brothers and some people fishing, and he just disappeared into the woods and was never seen again or found, and nobody's ever known what happened to him. And this is the story of a investigative journalist going back and reinvestigating that case and talking to people and seeing if he can't find out what happened to this little boy. And as it's called, Somebody Knows Something. And the idea is that through the reinvestigation of this, they can open up new clues, that maybe somebody will come forward, all that kind of thing. Really enjoying listening to that. It's very well done. And the last one is called Breakdown, which is also one that follows a couple of individual stories of people who've been probably wrongfully convicted, certainly ill-served through the justice system. Again, very interesting cases. And if you're interested in true crime, mystery, the law, all of those, I highly recommend. Someone Knows Something, Breakdown, Undisclosed. So that's that. And I'm looking at the time here, and it's getting long. So I'm going to end for today. Thank you all again so much for spending a little bit of your time with me. Please, as I said, join the Ravelry group, which is CreativeMoJo on Ravelry. You can follow me on Instagram as AuntieJo12. You can find me on Ravelry personally as Auntie Jo. And if you like this, you can subscribe in the link down below on YouTube. So again, thank you all, and I will see you next week.